The First World War. In this chapter, we shall cover the causes and the results of the World War I. World War I, all the way in 1914, was a war that had begun in Europe, and soon this war had engulfed almost the entire world with the battles fought in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. This war was different from the other wars fought earlier in terms of its scale and its repercussions. This war was fought on a worldwide scale and it affected near about all the countries of the world. In this war, new methods of defense and destruction were used. Moreover, in the earlier wars, the civilian populations were not generally involved, but this war was fought by the people as a whole. Therefore, this war is marked as the turning point in the history of the world. And because of the unprecedented extent of its spread, impact, and damage, and its total nature, this war is known to be the First World War. As we go ahead, let us see few questions when the war was held. The first question's answer is this war was fought between 1914 to 1918. Area was Europe, and this war was fought between the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. Let us learn about the Central and the Allied Powers. In this picture, you can see Central Powers are in the orange color. They are Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Allied forces or the Allied powers lied with the Great Britain, or what we call as France, Britain, France, and Russia. So, Central Powers and Allied Powers were the countries which were divided quite ahead of the war, and therefore there is one cause that we will learn here about is the division of Europe. Prior to that, let us learn about nationalism. This was one of the cause. Nationalism, the term that refers to the sense of unity felt by the people who share a common history, language, and culture. In other words, or in simple words, we can better understand this as too much patriotism for your country. And Germany was one here who showed too much of patriotism and was wanting to rule all over the world. Before the war, once Germany and France were into a smaller war where France was defeated by Germany and France had lost two of its provinces. They were Alsace and Lorraine. In the later half of the 19th century, this feeling of unity turned into extreme pride. Now, this made the people of many countries believe that their country is superior to the other countries. And this particular belief, something when goes extreme, we call it aggression. Therefore, this is called as aggressive nationalism. And this was that time there in Europe. Now, Austria and the Balkan states like Serbia, they all wanted that their fellow nationals who lived in other states should also come together and form a greater Balkan states. Now, these countries developed their expansionist policies in the name of nationalism. The military strength became synonymous with the national prestige, and every country here now began to increase its military power. So, nationalism or aggressive nationalism led to something which is known to be imperialism. Imperialism, we have already learned, this refers to that particular situation or state policy or practice by which a powerful nation establishes, or we can say dominates, its control over smaller countries or another country, either by direct territorial acquisition or by gaining political and economic control. So therefore, these were the causes. This was the first one of the cause, or the first cause, which had given an opportunity, or which had brought in this First World War. Now, by the end of 19th century, England and France had built up a huge colonial empire in both Asia as well as in Africa. British imperialism was now focusing on maintaining and expanding trade by exploiting the resources of its colonies such as India, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Egypt, South Africa, Caribbean islands, and many parts of Africa. Britain's this imperial power was reinforced by her powerful and the world's largest navy. Other countries of the world like Germany, Italy, Russia, and Japan also wanted to increase their sphere of influence and create their colonies in Asia and Africa. These colonies were essential for their progress, and as they could provide raw materials for their own industries and markets for their finished products. Besides acquiring these colonies would add to the power and prestige of these countries. All this led to a clash of interest among those countries. The European powers began to scramble for expanding their economic and political empire. Therefore, this aggressive nationalism and the fierce economic competition both together filled the atmosphere with a fear, apprehension, mutual hatred, and international tension. People felt convinced that international problems could only be solved through militarism. So, this started here. The second cause was the division of entire Europe. Now, here we have two words, triple alliance and triple entente. Now, what were these triple alliance and triple entente? You can see in the picture, triple entente was that Great Britain, France, and Russia, they had joined hands together and formed a group. Similarly, in triple alliance, it was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Italy fought against Germany and Austria-Hungary and soon left the alliance and joined the Triple Entente. So Germany and Austria-Hungary were now joined by the Ottoman Empire and the Bulgaria. Apart from this, towards the Entente, Canada, Australia, Italy, Japan, and US had by now joined. So two kinds of states in Europe, this Triple Entente and Triple Alliance in the early 20th century were formed. On one hand, there were single nation states, that is France and Germany, France, Holland, and Germany, whose national identities were based on their common language and traditions. And on the other hand, there were the imperial states like the Austria-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire. Now, empire which was ruled by the Habsburg dynasty. This empire, which was ruled by the Austria-Hungarian Empire, was ruled by Habsburg dynasty of Austria. Included in its territory Hungarian. It included Hungarian, Serb, Bosnian, and Croat population who spoke different languages and had different cultural traditions. Germany entered into an alliance with Austria-Hungary. Then in 1882, Italy joined the alliance and it came to be known as the Triple Alliance. So this is how Triple Alliance was formed. After the death of Bismarck, that is, France was able to establish quite good friendly relations with Russia and England. The Russian Empire included territories which were populated by Polish, Ukrainian, Turkish, and the Mongol populations. The three countries entered into this Triple Entente in 1907 to counter the Triple Alliance. Later, Japan also joined this Entente. Thus, now Europe was divided into two hostile camps. Rivalries between nations happened not just for the colonies, but also for colonial trade and trade routes as well. These rivalries created some suspicion, tension, and wars, which finally culminated in the First World War. Besides these two causes, there is some other cause which is termed as immediate cause. Now, immediate cause is a cause which is something that comes all of a sudden. So, what happened that suddenly there was a breakup, or this went on as a cause for the First War. Now, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, who was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, was assassinated at the Sarajevo capital of Bosnia. Sarajevo, which was the capital of Bosnia, on the 28th of June 1914. The assassination was organized by a secret society which was called the Black Hand or Union of Death, formed by the extremist Serbian nationalists whose aim was to unite all the Serbians into one single Serbian state. Austria served an ultimatum on Serbia on the 23rd of July, making some demands. These were 11 in number. Serbia accepted most of the demands except those that would have led to the loss of her own sovereignty. So, Austria declares war on Serbia on the 28th of July in 1914, and Russia started preparation for war to support Serbia. So, on the 1st of August 1914, Germany declared war on Russia, and on the 3rd August on France. Now, German troops started marching into Belgium to press on to France on August 4, and on the same day, Britain declares war on Germany. Britain, France, Russia, and the other allies were called the Allied powers, we just saw in the previous slide, while Germany, Austria, and their allies were called the Central powers. The war was fought in many different areas called fronts. Okay, these different areas were all called as fronts. There was a western front between Germany and northern France, and an eastern front between Germany and the Russian forces. So there was fighting at the sea and in the Middle East, where these allied powers had attacked the Ottoman Empire. This brings in the immediate cause, which is called as Sarajevo Crisis. So your causes that we covered here is nationalism and imperialism, division of Europe, and immediate cause as Sarajevo Crisis. Now, in 1919, Versailles, which was a suburb of Paris, came up with a conference. These victorious powers, or the allies, they met for a conference in Versailles for the very first time, and then later again in Paris. Though number of countries represented at the conference was 27, the terms of the peace treaties were really decided by the President of the United States, named Woodrow Wilson, and the Prime Minister of Britain, called Lloyd George. And there was Prime Minister of France, George Clemenceau. The defeated countries were not represented at the conference. The victorious powers even excluded Russia from the conference. as a result of the discussions at the Paris Conference on the 28th of June 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. It ended the war, and the basis of the treaty's negotiations was the American President Wilson's 14 points. The treaty was designed to prevent Germany from going to war again. Let us take a look about the 14 points of the treaty. This treaty declared Germany guilty of aggression. Okay, this is Germany is now declared to be feeling guilty of the aggressive nationalism, the aggression that it showed for its nationalism towards nationalism. Germany had to now pay for loss and damages suffered by the Allies during the war. The Rhine Valley, this was the area, Rhine Valley area was to be demilitarized and the west of Rhine to be occupied by the Allied troops for the next 15 years. Germany, which had taken over two provinces of France, that is Alsace and Lorraine, had to give it back to France. Eupen et Malmedy to Belgium. Similarly, Schleswig to Denmark, and Danzig became a free port. Germany ceded parts of her pre-war territory to Denmark, Belgium, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and France. And lastly, the coal mines in the German area were ceded to France, and Germany lost all her colonies to the victorious Allies. This treaty affirmed the complete independence of Belgium, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. The Covenant of the League of Nations was added to the Treaty of Versailles. The German army was restricted to a force of around 1 lakh soldiers, and the navy was limited to 15,000 men and 24 ships. The air force and submarines were all banned. Thus, Germany lost all her colonies to the victorious Allies. So these were the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and with this we come to the end of this chapter. Thank you.